Welcome everybody to this webinar about leadership and behavior in the AI era. And I'm Marco Lormans. I'm hosting this webinar today. I'm replacing Sander. Sander is hosting normally the webinar series that we do from Xebia, but he was not able to join us today. So for me on the right side and for you on the left side, I have Sarah Rehment. Sarah is a change management consultant. She has a lot of experience and she's very senior with helping organizations with large-scale transformations, bring deep expertise and change management and applying different frameworks and practices. On my left side and for you on the right, we have Chris Baron. Chris is a business change leader with a strong foundation in behavioral science and helps leadership translate strategy into a sustainable change. In this webinar today, we are going to continue the journey that we are discussing in this webinar series about AI and what AI is doing for the society today. And what we currently see is that AI is not only about technology anymore, but it's really being implemented and it's really affecting the huge organizations. So if we're looking at that, we can see that technology phase is past, so we can implement AI technology quite well in a local environment, but now the scaling it becomes more important, and then it becomes more than only technology. It will also involve organization and people. And especially the last part of this sentence, people. Today we are going to focus on how does AI affect people and how can we overcome resistance. So if we look at from Xebia perspective on what we see in the market currently, AI scaling is really becoming more difficult. So the local initiatives technically are successful, but organizations very much have difficulties to adopt AI in scale. Secondly, what we also see is that connecting those initiatives from local business value to the real strategy of an organization and to business outcomes and business value. And that's one of the things we would like to address as well. And finally, and that's really the main topic for today, where we're going to talk about with Sarah and Chris, is how can we adopt AI with the people. And what we've learned also recently, there was a study by Boston Consulting Group that actually has the label or the title, Leaders Assume Employees Are Excited About AI, and they stated they are wrong. And that article, which is published in November this year, also states that the leaders are very optimistic they think about 76% of people really are very enthusiastic and excited about AI, and they really would like to use it yesterday. But in reality, that research also showed that only 30% of the employees, so the workforce that needs to apply it in practice, is very more confused, resisting, and they still fear AI because they think it can impact their daily job. So based on that, our focus will be how can we overcome that and how can we look from a human perspective on how this AI and how can we create sustainable change at these organizations. Maybe the last part of this introduction, change in general, because that's where we are now going, is still very hard. So the research that is done in that era that states about 70% of change, digital change, is still failing, it still applies. So also in the AI era, the statement is 70% of change will fail. How can we overcome that? And one of the things that research then shows that people and change management will positively affect the success of sustainable change at these organizations. So that's also where I'm going to challenge Sarah and Chris today. How does this look like? To close the introduction, I have this screen, I have also the chat in front of me. So also we would like to make this very much interactive. So if you have questions during the conversation that we will start, please raise them and I will do my best to also drop them at the audience, at Sarah and Chris, so we can also take that into account in the discussion. So we like to make it interactive. If there are really a lot of questions, I will select one and then in the end, at the end of the webinar, we can take them into account still. So we will go to the first question to set the stage. So Sarah and Chris, when you look at leadership today, what stands out as the biggest shift compared to a couple of years ago when AI was less of a hype as it is today?
Yeah. Well, I think back in the days, there was a lot of, you still have projects and you still have programs, right? But there was a clear roadmap on this is our plan for 2026, this is our plan for 2027, this is what we want to do. And now it's so unknown. Things are happening constantly, markets are changing. So change did not become a project or program focus on anymore. So because it's continuous change happening. Yeah? So a lot of things have changed, continuous change or change in general is happening all the time. And we're a bit moving away from the project program focus. So that means there are a lot of changes and things happening at the same time now.
Yeah, definitely. And to add into that, I think the biggest change I see is about with that situation of continuous change, that people are tired of change. So change fatigue, we even have a term for it. It's really a thing that I see the last couple of years. People resisting to change or not willing or either can do change that much. So managing that, I think for leadership, quite a challenge, and for me, quite exciting one because that's my field of expertise, of course.
Can you then also explain why it's important for leaders to focus on the human part of behavior and also the change dynamics rather than just technology?
Yeah, I think if we only focus on tools and systems, you can implement great softwares, you can implement great tools, but at the end, they are used by people. So if you don't onboard your people, if you don't bring the awareness to them, you will not get the full potential out. So I always see it with two sides. So you have the people side, taking people along on what's changing, what is new, but also taking the opportunities and chances for you as an organization. Because if people are resistant to certain tools and systems, they will not use it to the full potential, which is then also a loss for an organization, because that's why you implement AI, right? To solve a problem you have. And if you don't bring your people close to that, and if you don't show them how it works, and if you only focus on the technical side, you will not get that potential out.
I agree, and technology eventually doesn't fail, right? You can change that, and people do.
Yeah.
So in order to have that change that you want in your organization, you should really focus on that aspect as well.
Clear. So this is setting the stage. So we first conclusion that we can draw is then technology. Now we sort of understand it, although it's very complex technology. Process around that is also you need to change your organization, you need to change your processes, but the people part is very much important. And we know that for a while, and in general, change is very complex. So let's go to the next phase. So we set the stage. Sarah, you also prepared a small exercise for everybody to understand why change in general is very complex.
Yeah.
Can you help us out here?
Sure. So everyone, also for the people at home, if you have a pen and a piece of paper, grab it. And my ask for you is, to everyone of course, and I'm going to set a timer of 20 seconds, so very short. I want you to write down the 5 meals you had during the last days. The first meals which pop up your mind, write down as many as you can. I would say start now, you have 20 seconds for that. All right, time is up. I want you to do the same thing. So how many meals did you write down?
I have 6.
6?
I have 5.
5, perfect. Now you can use a new paper. And I want you to do the same with the activities you did the last days. But I want you to write it down with your other hand. The hand you don't use usually. So I would say 20 seconds again. Write down, clear. on
Clear.
the activities you remember.
We haven't tested it up front, so
That's not exactly. All right, time is up for that as well. So, how many do you have?
2-ish.
Two.
Cannot read it myself.
Yeah, for me too as well. And I
Yeah.
think the big challenge for me is not the activities in my head, but is really trying to
Yeah.
write this with a different hand.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So, at the end, this is a very simple exercise, right? And you might ask yourself, how does that relate to what we're talking about? But that exactly is the thing. If you ask your people in the organization, your team, your colleagues, to do something different, it just takes time, right? You will not immediately be able to adapt to the new process, to the new ways of working. And Marco, if you go to 2 slides further, there was also some research done, right, on how long it will take people to actually adapt to something new. And this doesn't matter if it's AI or if it's any other change. So you do have to adjust a little bit. That takes weeks, right? And to be really comfortable and stop the old process can take up to years. That, of course, also relates on the complexity and the change of behavior, for example. So that also plays a huge role, because we often tend to look at all the other things, the systems, the usage on how am I using a certain system, but we forget often the behavior part.
And can you, because this is a relatively small example, and if you now look at the results of the 2 people on this table, that you see the outcome is much less, so more than 50% for me, and also I think for Chris. So how can you relate that then to a large complex change in an organization?
Yeah, well, I think you can, it shows immediately that you have a change in what people do all the time. People feel uncomfortable when it comes to change. All of a sudden they have to do something new they're not aware of. There's a lot of pressure, right, because of changes happening all the time. Also the unknown emotions. So there's a lot of unclarity around it. So it really reflects on the entire organization, and often the case is that people are actually not taking along, right? So, for example, there will be a new system in place, and you will receive the information quite soon up front, and then it's expected from you to write with your other hand or to use that new system. You need to have time to change. And if we look at AI, for example, because that's quite unknown for a lot of organizations, let the people try to experience. As leaders, you're not the expert in all the fields, right? You have your experts in the various areas. So give those experts the time to experiment. What is the problem and what do we want to fix? So I know time is a big word. No one has time. But if you want to overcome that transformations are failing, this is something which is needed. And as a leader, you are not the one who will say this is how it works now. You're the one who are supporting the people who will have the change in how it will work. They are the ones who will practice, they will test, and they will then adapt the new ways of working.
Yeah. So one thing I got from your answer is indeed that when you really want to do this change, also with large complex changes at organizations, you need to give space and room and time to do that.
Yeah.
And you say also explicitly leaders should be aware and they should facilitate that. If you then go to you, Chris, so because that's one thing indeed which maybe some leaders overlook, maybe they are too optimistic, like the research also shows that our people are so smart, they are brilliant, and they can just adopt it and they can keep the same pace. But that's not the case. Do you know something else? Some other thing that when you see these change situations, what other things that leaders overlook?
I think connected to the factor of time, which of course is a big factor. I think something that is overlooked is how quickly people tend to go to their automatic behavior that they know, right? So if you would add also the pressure here of this exercise and put in the expectation, so hey, I expect you to write down 10 with your left hand, which is my non-dominant hand, then I would easily say, okay, let's switch back to right then if I want to make the assignment or create the result. So switching to your automatic behavior is a very real thing for people to do because it's comfortable. It's logic, right? And you have to get to the result as quickly as possible. Most often, that is what expected. So, one thing that is overlooked is that maybe sometimes also interpreted as resistance. It's for the person itself. It's logic, right? So I'm just going to do what I do best, what I know best, and that's the automatic behavior. So I think that's one thing that also seems to be very overlooked. People just tend to do what feels natural or what they know best. Right.
Okay, and how can you, so that's one thing we overlook. Maybe we will touch that topic later on how to address that.
Definitely,
okay.
Yeah.
So then, so it's indeed making available time to really adopt and play around with that. And also what you see, the people in general with behavior, you do your automatic behavior, you feel comfortable with that, so you continue to do that. So it's not always resistance, it's just also, you are just used to doing that and you will continue to do that because doing it differently, as we just saw in the example, it really showed that it's more difficult at the moment. Yeah, so maybe in the future not, but at the moment, this exercise, doing that task is more difficult.
Yeah, absolutely. And there are a lot of factors weighing in the environment of people that you need to take into account in order to make a change. In order also, and that's what we're going to talk about as well, is create a sustainable change. So to create a change one time, it's not that difficult, right? You can even force people to change their behavior. But to make that into a sustainable behavior, related to bringing better results, that's why I think the real challenge lies.
Yeah, I think that's nice to also jump in, right? Because sustainable change means making it a topic in an organization, right? I barely see change management in the strategy of the leadership. Actually, I haven't really seen it that much yet, but we talk about it all the time, right? We want constant change. We want that people change their behavior, but we barely see that.
And that is what Marco was saying in his introduction. That is what the numbers also say.
Exactly.
Right? So I've been in this game, let's say, for 20 plus years.
Yeah.
And for 20 plus years, we keep saying, we really need to focus on behavior change. That's the most important thing to do. And now, 20 years later, we haven't really much learned that within an organization because still, let's say 70%, I don't know if that's really true, of course, but 70% still fail. So that's the number says what you're saying. Yeah,
and it's
still not that present.
Clear. So let's close the discussion on the exercises. So Sarah, you also have a lot of experience in guiding these transformations at customers, and you prepared also this slide, which we already briefly saw. Can you elaborate a little bit on what you see and how leading change is different today compared to, for example, 5 years ago?
I think I mentioned it already at the beginning, that it's really something which is constantly happening. So we constantly are facing change. And I think it relates also nicely to what we just said, to make it a part of your strategy. So if you go to the next slide, because I, of course, see it a lot within organizations, but I also read a lot of article blogs, and there was one sentence which came across me, and I found it so powerful, right? And it says that the only true constant we currently are facing within organizations is change. If that is the case, why are we not making it a strategy topic, right? How are we not looking into how can we make our organization change resilient? What do we need to do to support our people? Because why is there so much resistance is because of the experience with change. If we come into organizations, I often hear something like another change.
It's the change fatigue part.
Exactly, what you
Yeah.
mentioned earlier, the
Yeah.
change fatigue part. How many of those changes which were started are still in place?
Yeah.
So what we see, there's a tendency to, okay, we need to change now and we need to change fast. But what is actually the reason of the change? What kind of problem do you want to solve as an organization or department or team? And really identify the reason behind it and prioritize as well. Do we need everything at the same time? I don't think so. What do we actually need? Again, the problem solving part. And I do see the role of a leader, what I also said at the beginning, more as a facilitator, right? Providing everything what people need and guiding them along this journey to now solve the problems with AI tools, right?
But is it then also, I think there's two dimensions, and maybe from experience. So you say more frequent change. So if I look at customers from Xebia perspective, they struggle with a couple of things as well. I think in the past, they also wanted to do big changes. So that was really the scope of a change was very big, and organizations really have difficulty to really implement a change because it's so big. It's so a big scope, and maybe it was clear what they want to reach. So the ambition is clear and the outcome is clear, but they simply are not capable of executing on that change. And then the world is indeed going faster, so they start a new change very often in the same context. So you have change over change. So that's one thing that I observe. Secondly, if you look at changes, if you really are based on then, maybe let's not do the secondly. Let's do the first one first. So what's then the advice for leadership? Should they just put some new change? If you're not ready with the old one, do you need to put that on hold? How do you work with that?
Well, we also support within agile ways of working, right? Or working in iterations, working with what you know, working with what is the most burning thing at the moment. Of course, if you see that it's too big, you break down the things and you're like, okay, what do we need right now? What do we need maybe in a 1 year's time being part of a certain software we're implementing? But what is really the thing we need at the moment? What is our priority as an organization? So making that big change smaller and also more realistic, more understandable. Because of course, if it's so big, there are a lot of uncertainties, and uncertainties are scary for all of us, right? If we don't know what's going to happen then and then, we feel more tensions about it. But if we have a feeling on, okay, we're first trying this and then we practice and we see, does that fit to our organization? Does that really help us with the problem we're facing? Great. You will have motivated people because they will be involved. They will be the ones driving it. So we always advise to make this big thing into chunks and start with one thing which is the most important at the beginning, also to maybe have some quick wins, to have some time to like success moments, celebrate things. Often we also tend to accept successful changes and they're just being accepted.
Yeah, and to add into that, I think a lot also has to do is creating the environment in order for people to want to change. Right, so we often very much look at what is the change. We want better results, right, or better culture or whatever, big container words or specific results, and not focusing on in what environment are people are going to do that change. So if the environment of people, like things like timelines, ways of work, reinforcement methods, etc., doesn't change, then it's just a trigger for people. Oh, yeah, another person or another thing is needed for change. But if nothing changes in your environment, why would you even do that? So I think the more focus on what is the environment for people wanting to change or can change, for that matter, I think that's also an aspect not to overlook that much. Of course, we can also look into that deeper, but I think that aspect relates to this.
Yeah.
Okay, but let's assume that that's true. So, and then this statement that we saw on the slide, that we know that constant change is now the reality, which was the pace is different. I know, Sarah, you also prepared the second slide on a framework that can help leaders today. And that's in this case ADKAR model. So I'm not sure if you would like to also explain for the people that are listening what the model is. But also I did in the preparation some research, but this model is also about 30 years old. So then the interesting question is, do you still think a model like ADKAR, can you still apply it in the current AI era?
Yeah, maybe if you show the next slide, then people get a feeling on what the ADKAR means and what does it state. Well, there's some provenness, or like it's proven that there are steps in there which will help you to succeed at transformation. If this is the only thing you are relying on, then I think that's a problem, right? Because you don't look, for example, at behavior, right? But you give it a certain direction. So, for example, what I sometimes see is that the why is not clear around the change. So people are not really understanding, why are we changing? What does that mean also for me, the change? At the end, what the ADKAR model or other frameworks around change management say is, don't forget to look into this, right? Keep that in mind. Guide your people throughout the process. And so we see issues with the why, we see issues with what's in there for the people, but also around knowledge and training, time to actually be able to adapt what you learned new. So this is, we just did the exercise with writing down the things. If I would say from now on you are only allowed to write with your non-dominant hand, yeah, that will be maybe difficult. Okay, we're using laptops nowadays. If you would need to write something down, it will take you longer, right? So learning it, giving it some time to adapt to this, it's needed. So what those frameworks, how we use them, is as a certain guiding direction to what you should take into consideration when you take your people through change. And reinforcement, and I think, Chris, that's something you will talk about now as well, because this is so important. We can use the awareness, the desire, knowledge, and ability, but if we don't reinforce, then it's most likely that a change maybe will not stick.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm going to talk about that later deeper, and I think to add into this one, and I always had a let's say hate-love relationship with models like these, right? So I think it's very good to strategize around. It's good to have the knowledge that there are different phases or different aspects of change that you need to address, which ADKAR certainly does. Even reinforcement, which not a lot of models do, which is directly from behavioral science, by the way. I think you should really look at that way, why it's 30 years old and still, let's say, viable. Because these are, let's say, on a higher level where change, which phases changes goes through, right? So the thing here is, I think, the devil's in the details. So how do you get from these strategic topics, phases that you need to address, into okay, what happens on the playing field, or what happens on in the situations of people, again with the environment. If you can translate these topics, and we certainly will in a minute, then I think it can be very powerful. If it's just something that you strategize for, and you create a nice plan for, then you can also not do it. And that's also something that we see a lot, of course, in the last couple of years. So if you really are not able to translate this from strategy into strategy execution, yeah, then.
Okay, so but maybe to conclude on how to lead to change in the AI era. So my conclusion here is that the ADKAR model is 30 years old almost. You can adapt it still to the AI era. That's not a problem. The phases in there, you should not really adapt it, because one of the questions was, should we change the framework? Should we change that? Now, I don't hear really a good argument for doing that. There's also not really an alternative yet in the market, I assume, that we can use. So these models are still applicable.
But I think, Marco, to also then, of course, wrap it up, but I think you can use it to have this awareness of the things you should take into consideration, right? Part of a change strategy, because if you ignore those things, it will be difficult. I mean, there may be other ways to do it, right? And there's way more than only this, but it gives a certain direction and it helps. So I think that's why it's maybe 30 years old and not changed yet.
Okay.
When
I
there
think
are
what
some adaptations.
to add into that,
Yeah.
what I like about ADKAR instead of, let's say, other models, not naming, not wanting to name and shame one, but is that this is not in a sequential way, right? So you often see that you have
Yeah.
some sort of a
Exactly.
circle with steps. Maybe
Yeah.
8 steps going into one, but it's not a sequential way to do, right? So first step 1, then 2. No, it's really something that you need to address on different levels and maybe go back on one. So awareness is not something that you do and then okay, been there, done that, and let's move on to desire. So it's not.
But can
how
you
it works like that.
elaborate a little bit on that? So indeed, why is awareness not just a check mark? You did that awareness, you explained what AI means, what the AI is, what the technology is that is coming, and then you're done. So why do you need to repeat that?
I think you answered your own question in the beginning, because change upon change means that you need to create that awareness again and again and again. And I keep repeating myself, but we're going to talk about it later. Is also awareness, or a model like this, is just a trigger. It hasn't resolved into any change yet. It's just something that you do in order that you expect a change from it, a change in behavior, if you will. So it's just a trigger for people, for at least organizations, in order to trigger some new behavior. So if you don't see any change in behaviors, then you need to go back and say, okay, then apparently we didn't do a good job on awareness yet. Let's try something else. Or in the next change, hey, we need to address it again, but then in a different matter.
Okay, but let's make that step then to behavior and to go more in depth on people.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the things is the next step we would like to discuss is understanding this resistance to change. So which you what you just mentioned, Chris, you don't see the behavior change, although you have defined the desired behavior. And I think a lot of leadership is struggling with that. They don't understand, even if they facilitate everything, why do our people, workforce, don't adopt this new technology? And then especially AI, but I think for technology in general. So Chris, can you elaborate a little bit more from your perspective, what's really behind this resistance we often see in transformation and change?
Yeah. So what's behind resistance is usually put like an emotion or an attitude or something like that. And I think it's more about the friction between what we ask people to do and what the environment is that they're working in. So referring back to that, what I said earlier, think focus on the environment where people work in is really important. So then you can ask a person to do something else. But if all the things in the environment are still working the same, then in 9.5 out of 10 times, change will not really happen, or happen once, and then people have the consequence of, hey, this is not working because I'm still in the same situation. I'm not going to do it anymore. So that friction between what we ask people to do, the change, and the environment that hasn't been changed, I think that is what we call resistance, and it's visible in, let's say, what we label as resistance, which for me is actually very valuable information that you can work with. Instead of labeling something as resistance, which is often something that you want to get rid of, right? I don't want resistance, or hey, I have resistance now. How do I get rid of it? Well, it's actually, in my opinion, very valuable information.
Okay.
Yeah, create feedback, right?
Absolutely.
The great feedback of understanding where are we at the moment.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
not ignoring it.
But you then describe a gap between, indeed, you ask somebody to do something and change behavior, and then the environment is not changing.
Yeah.
So what is then for you, how can we overcome that? What's the next step for dealing
Yeah,
with that?
I think now is a good time, Jamie, to go to the next slide, because when you look at what's behind or where let's say the resistance comes from, is a lot around uncertainty. The uncertainty of what will the change or the new situation bring me. So functions that are behind that, in behavior science we have 4 functions, and 2 of them are really linked to like resistance. So escape and attention are really functions that we want as a human being, right? So if change comes, hey, the first reaction or the function that looks like resistance can be, hey, I'm gonna step back, I'm gonna avoid something, I'm gonna delay, just to see, can I get that uncertainty, translate that back into stability in that uncertainty, or getting the control back. So 2 functions. One, you see often people do, well, it's not my change, I'm gonna see what people will do, not act, maybe not do the things that has been asked, so really on the escape part. And the purpose is to reduce pressure, or avoid risk, taking risks that might get you into a situation that you don't want to be in. If you look on the other end of the spectrum, you see attention, people that speak up, questions, I'm not going to do this, why should we do it? And then with the why, they literally would ask, well, why should we do this? Or I don't agree, or challenge the change that is. And also that has to do with seeking clarity, or maybe can influence the situation in order to get back the control of the uncertainty that I feel. So a lot of is related to these 2 functions. When we let's say label resistance, these 2 functions are underlying that, and that's valuable information. You can interpret it that way, and that's something that you can strategize for or work with, instead of just label it as, in this case, resistance.
Okay, but help me then a little bit with exploring this deeper. So how can leaders then start to recognize, so they still see resistance, which is a negative word. And now you explained that this has a cause, but how can help leaders now? How can they recognize what resistance might be telling? So how can you recognize the things you just explained?
Well, I think the first step is to stop seeing resistance as a problem that you want to get rid of, like I said, and it's information, and it's certainly needed for you to work with, and you can adjust the system or the environment, and not the people. You cannot just change you, but you can change the environment of people that they are working with. So reward systems, or maybe the communication, which we talked earlier about. So changing things in the environment for people wanting to show different behavior. I think that's what really leaders should look like, and that is there. It's not like that information or that knowledge is some magic or anything. I think there's a lot of unlearned lessons that we can use from behavior psychology or behavior science in that matter.
Yeah, and from Xebia perspective, we are very good in also bringing new technology, also AI technology. So when you both help to do such a technical transformation at the customer, we do experience that. Also in the opening statement, it was like resistance of people is really something that we get requests from the market. How do we deal with that? So can we again make one step, go one step deeper? What is very concretely then something that we are going to put in place to work with?
On the resistance part, or implementing AI?
No, I don't think that. I think the statement was the implementation of the technology is not really the biggest issue. But how can you really make sure that you get the business value or the goal that you intend to have from this technology change, so from this change?
Okay,
and then you do take into account that there will be some behavior that is not the designed behavior. So we expect again that people are enthusiastic about the new technology, but still you see the opposite. So what will be then a very good action, tangible action?
Can I answer this? Sorry, Anna, I don't want to keep talking the whole time, but I think two things are really important here. So one is linking results that you want to achieve with a change because you want better results in most of the time, is linking those results into with what behaviors do we think we can achieve those results. And if you come across on the behavior part, excuse me, that you need new behaviors, insert a behavioral change, you really need to address and specify those behaviors. So not words like, oh, we need to communicate better, or we need to collaborate better in order to use this AI tool, or etc. No, sorry, give me some water. But it's really to specify the behavior. What do we see people do? Or what do we hear them say? So really things that we can observe apart from words that we use to containerize, right? So something like collaborate or communication for that matter. So specify behaviors and linking those to the results. I think that's a very important step that I don't really see a lot in practice. And the other one, to make that complete, the other point that I want to address is the knowledge of how a behavioral change actually works. I think that is very valuable. And if you zoom out a little bit, because I can talk for 3 days about this topic, but if you zoom out a little bit, it's really about what if you have specified the behavior, what has happened before the behavior takes place, and what is happening when the behavior has taken place. Read the consequences. And especially the latter is really of influence of future behavior. So for in this case, an AI tool has been implemented. I am showing the behavior of, hey, I'm using the AI tool, which, let's say, we like, that's desired behavior. The consequence of that behavior for that person is key. So if the consequence is, this tool was really not good, it didn't help me at all, it gave me a lot more work, the quality is not good. So those are all experiences, consequences that make me feel like, yeah, I'm not going to use this in the future, which immediately can be addressed as resistance. They don't want to do this, or they don't want to adopt it. On the other hand, if you have a consequence that is very positive, hey, it takes me a lot of work. Hey, wow, this quality is good. Well, that consequence is positive. And then next time I would say, okay, I'm going to use it again. So the focus on the environment of people, on the other hand, trying to trigger the right behaviors, the desired behaviors, and then, more importantly, focus on the consequences of that behavior. I think that is very key. So to make it more tangible, if you will. But sorry, and I don't know if you want to add into something.
I have one follow-up question, because if the consequence is indeed that you see that people don't speak out, that the expected behavior or the tool that they need to use is really helping them. So AI has a lot of these promises like productivity gains, your tasks are being automated, you don't need to do it yourself, which should be very nice.
Yeah.
But if people still don't speak up, how are you going to make that concrete then?
Yeah, so if you look at the slide, then I'm pointing behind you, then you're in that function of escape, right? So not using it or stepping back or avoid or delay something. That has to do with I don't feel certain that this is going to bring me. That can be maybe fear of losing your job, or maybe fear of whatever. So a leadership cue, and that's why I put it in there, is that you really have to think, where might my environment or our environment feel unsafe or unpredictable? Maybe you should focus more on that awareness that in the model that we just saw more often, or even more than you did up front. Maybe it's not enough. So I think really analyze what is behind the behavior that you see or the behavior that you don't see, people not using. I think that is valuable to do so.
Okay.
Yeah, it might be also to add on here, because you said something they have to use, right? That's what I meant earlier as well. You have a group of experts, let them be the experts on what is really helping us, instead of this is a tool everyone is using now, so we're also implementing it, and we expect everyone to use it. We have no idea what it will really do and how it will really help specific groups. Instead of really giving your groups or the people around certain expertises the opportunity to try that out themselves. So of course you have certain limitations, but at the end let them. So what we always do when we come into organizations as well, we form internal change teams. So you want immediately to have that knowledge within the organization. You automatically have internal drivers from all the impacted groups. So if they have a positive experience with certain things, or can say, come, we form a workforce or a test group around something, and we have the ability to play around. We organize a hackathon, for example, right? And really experiencing those new tools they can use or new features. I think that will also support the negative concept, like not support, but they will then have good experience with that, or be like, hey, that really didn't work, that will not help us in the future. Great, don't use it.
Especially, and we talked about this before, right? So you also have to maybe lower your expectations on that part, because if you say we want everyone to use it, well, who is, if that 100% of your people, then a behavioral change is always an individual one, and people change in different timelines, right? So it's not like I want everyone to do that, then within 3 months or something, everyone is doing that. So you also need to accept the fact that some people are going to change faster or do a better job on it than others, and maybe even some are not going to change at all, right? So that's also something that I tend to see in lots of organizations, that we just expect everyone to do it, which is, if you think about it, is not really realistic, right?
Yeah. But that is for leadership then. If we bring it back, if now we understand resistance and that better, and there's resistance in change, and we are specifically talking about AI change because it's very complex technology. You make it also, it's really, if you want to be successful, it's really also individual effort. But if you then go back, Sarah, that you actually help large organizations with large change, how does leadership then deal with that? Because they don't have the skill, or they don't have the time, or whatever excuse you can find to actually go to everybody individually. So what's then the direction that you need to take in this case?
Do you want to take this one?
Yeah.
I always have two thoughts about that. Well, on the other one, I keep my opinion on, which the research also backs up. Change, behavioral change is always individual. So expecting to create something that works for everyone is not realistically. That's one thought or one thing that I always say to whether it's clients internally, etc. So it's always an individual one. And I think as an organization, you can really, when you think of an environment or environments, teams, value streams, departments, whatever, groups of people, I think if you look at what are the things that you as a leader can change in that environment, which is actually about attention, it's about incentives, it's about communication, it's about all those things you can change. That is what your work as a leader is. You can set that environment yourself. That is what you do. That is your responsibility. So on the other hand, I still think there is this glass ceiling. There's always an individual process, which things that you cannot, let's say, influence enough, because you don't know where people are in their life or in their work, that there are certain things that you just cannot influence or influence enough to make a change. So that's one thing. And I think on the other hand, you have the responsibility and the ability as a leader to change the environment for a group of people that has that will increase the probability that change will be successful.
Anything to add to that, Sarah?
No.
Okay. And maybe then, because looking at time as well, I don't see that many questions now, so I'm not going to address that. I think your statement, Chris, was very clearly also what this article from last month showed, that we need to be more employee-centric environment, so employee-centric organization. That's exactly also, I think it matches with your statement. Just you need to have this attention, incentives, all of these things need to be in place. So we have 5 minutes left. I would like to go then to the closing. So we shared a lot about starting about what's the challenge currently in the AI era. So with transformation, technology transformation, then we explored how change is still difficult. We saw that with the example that we experienced. We went more deep into change management these days. We have old models, but you need to apply them in the current era. And finally, we also then moved to the people part and why resistance, specifically for people. What is resistant, and we need to better understand that. And you gave some tips also what on understanding that and how to deal with that, so that you understand change and then you can understand resistance and you can deal with that. So having that said, so let's go to the closing of this webinar. And I would like to invite both of you to come with sort of actually 2 final questions. So could you please share your one piece of advice for leaders who are facing transformation challenges today regarding AI? And secondly, what key insight do you hope people take away from the session? If you would like to combine it, of course, you're welcome to do so as well.
Would you like to start?
So I think, to the first one, right? And so what can leaders take away? Really make change a part of your strategy. Make change. And when I talk about change, I don't only talk about an ADCA model or whatsoever, because behavioral change is part of this, right? So really, there you can see it's a quite it's a bigger topic. So make that part of the strategy. And then the second one as a key takeaway, I really would say provide autonomy to your people, provide autonomy to your experts. So give them the opportunity to figure things out as well by guiding and supporting them. That would be my main 2 things as takeaways and as takeaways.
Yeah. Shall I add to that one? I think piece of advice would be treat the behavior as your best source of information, like I briefly stated. I think it's really something also to take away. So I'm going to combine the 2 questions to take away from the session. It's not something that you specifically want to get rid of. I think it's something that you will encounter in some point of time, and it provides you with very valuable information to work with, which is not always what it seems like, or what you think of it. So really treat it like information, like data, if you will, and analyze it that way, and maybe create interventions or create those changes on the environment of people. I think that is I think that's the best piece of advice that I can give. And I wrote something down, and I think that really hits the mark for me. Is change always shows up in behavior first, long before it shows up in results. So you first see the results, you need to change on that, and then it's gonna get you to result. It's not the other way around, just to push on the results and expect the behavior to be there. So yeah, I think something like that.
Thank you for this last words. That really brings me to closing this webinar. So we've seen now a conclusion. I can actually not go over your statement, Chris, for looking at behavior, but for closing, technology alone with technology implementation for AI is simply not sufficient. We really see that process, and especially what we talked about today is about people and human behavior. That's really, you need to take that seriously, and you need to really, as leadership, invest in that capability to understand behavior and see that indeed as information. So I'm going to close with one slide. So this is a link to the website. So from Xebia perspective, we have Sarah, Chris, specialized consultants in doing this work. If this discussion resonates with you, and if you would like to know more about that or get help, please get in touch with us or go to the link, and we can continue the conversation with you about how we can help you with these challenges that you are facing. Having that said, I would like to thank everybody for attending online. I would like to thank Sarah. I would like to thank Chris for this nice conversation we had. And then we can close, and we will invite you again for the next webinar, which will be hosted probably by Sander again. Thank you all, and have a good day.
Thanks all.